Hey everyone, today we're ranking every killer in the game based on their strongest state within DbD history. So we're taking the peak of every character basically and judging them in a tier list. All killers at their peak strength ranked worst to best. Here's our tiers and let's get into it. D tier, still awful. A tier for the killers who really don't benefit much at all from being at their peak strength, with it not being too different maybe from their current strength. Trapper, for example, is still pretty awful. His peak was his release date back in 2016, when he was able to place traps under hooks. There was no anti-camp features either back then, making him a bit of a monster. Unfortunately, this is pretty awful by today's standards, so it's still awful. Ghostface's peak is debatably now, with him actually going through a number of substantial buffs over time, and an add-on overhaul. Despite this though, he's still really bad at the moment, and always has been very average. Maybe he deserves to be a bit higher. Whatever frame of time you pick though, I think it doesn't make him much better when comparing him to these other characters' peaks, which are way better. C tier, pretty solid. A tier for the characters who just end up being pretty solid in comparison to everyone else. Their peak is still pretty decent, but nothing special. Wraith was strongest somewhere between March 2021 to December 2022, when he got his buffs to movement speed, but before he got his nerfs to his post-uncloak speed boost. He was in a really solid state around here, but comparatively to the rest, this is still just very average. Bubba was strongest any time after his big rework, where he essentially got a power, up until October 2023 when anti-camp was introduced. I mean, he's a great camper, and so this honestly ended his peak, I think, when he could no longer excel at his greatest strength. Pig was strongest just after January 2019, when she finally received a slew of buffs, and she hadn't been hit with back-to-back nerfs just yet. Back then, Pig just had a better chance, honestly, with less exposure to her power, and more going for her. Cloud's strongest state, I think, was post his rework in February 2021, when he had just gotten his new yellow bottles, and most players facing him were quite uncertain how to counter them. Back then, he also had pre-nerf Redhead's pinky finger, which allowed for more than one insta-down bottle, making him kind of a monster. Myers was a little stronger on release in October 2016. He could stalk multiple people and generally had a better grip on gameplay. In part 2 due to his busted perks that released with him like Save the Best for Last, along with the obsession mechanic which rewarded you for tunneling the obsession out of the game quickly, which Myers was sort of an expert at. Knight, I would just say his current version, post his August 2024 rework. He's far stronger than he ever used to be with his ability to pick which guard to use and cycle between them with separate cooldowns. B tier, very strong. These character peaks were actually pretty strong, and did stand out a bit more, I'd say. Nemesis doesn't really have a notably strong point. You can just pick almost any time, and it'd make sense for him. He's always been pretty decent and reliable, so I'd just place him here in strong, judging him by his standard today. Dredge is kind of similar, where it's just never had a notable standout point. We could maybe just say its current state and post the buffs it received last year in 2024, it's slightly better than it was before. Xenomorph has not been changed all too much, but I'd probably go with Release Xeno. Release Xeno or around that time was a little stronger than now, before the nerfs it later received in 2025. Springtrap, it's gotta be his PTB state actually, if I were to choose between live or PTB. PTB Springtrap had some slightly stronger add-ons like the pre-nerf Foxy's Hook, for example. Going into live, Springtrap lost a few tricks, but is still pretty strong. Demogorgon was probably strongest with its Lifeguard Whistle Devour Hope build, which was removed in November 2024. This build allowed you to use Demo's portals as sensors with use of Lifeguard Whistle, allowing you to stop any survivor from cleansing your Devour Hope totem. It was pretty busted, and probably the strongest Demo has been. Vecna, I'd go with current Vecna actually, with his recent cooldown buffs allowing him to get his abilities back pretty efficiently. He's fairly strong nowadays. Dracula is currently pretty strong too, and notably after some buffs he received in 8.2.2, where he received a number of buffs to his switch and bat form. He's always been pretty strong regardless though. A tier. A for amazing. This is where we get into sort of busted territory. We're going above all of the characters who were simply good or pretty great, and going into the characters who were genuinely maybe a bit too overtuned or a bit too powerful. Unknown is just its current state, I would say, given that it's not been out that long really. Unknown has always been pretty solid, and is still today. Singularity's strongest state, I would say, is today, and post his huge 8.1.0 buff wall, where he received many small buffs and great things like his Biopod auto-lock-on. Hux has been through some pretty awful states though, so it's not saying too much maybe. He is high A tier nowadays though, so it's not something to be sneered at. Doctor was strongest post June 2018 for a few months, when for a period a nurse's cooling worked alongside Doctor's power, shocking someone and afflicting them with madness caused them to be revealed by a nurse's cooling if they tried to snap out of it, as it counted as a healing action. This made him pretty busted, but nothing crazy. Sadako was strongest in July 2023 when she was able to simply repeatedly teleport and make the entire team condemned fairly quickly. She's had a few states similar to this over the years, but specifically during this period she was able to do this particularly well, without many downsides at all. She forced you to hold a tape, but also if you got hit whilst holding one, your condemned went up very quickly too. It created a frustrating lose-lose situation. Plague has always been pretty strong due to the fact that she provides the very unique ability of stopping basically all forms of healing when facing her. For this reason, I think her peak strength occurred in October 2021, when the healing meta with Circle of Healing was at its peak. Plague actually pulled ahead of many killers during this time with her ability to shut down these perks. This wasn't too different admittedly though from her base level strength. Houndmaster was strongest and currently is, I would say, just post her release up until now, with her bugs mostly being ironed out, where before they did affect her power a little bit. Nowadays they don't so much, and so she works functionally as she's meant to, which I guess is her peak considering she's not been out that long. Chucky was strongest around his release I would say, and before he got his various scamper nerfs. He had a very easy dash ability that was fast and recharged very quickly. He's not too different nowadays after his rebuff, but not quite as good as he was originally I think. He was a bit of a menace back then. Pyramid Head's strongest state was post his 4.0.0 release when he was still able to cancel his ranged attack really quickly. This made him really hard to face when trying to run a window against him, as it was almost impossible to not get hit, as he could just plant his attack and make a quick choice of what to do, fire the attack or cancel it and hit you, because it was an instant cancel basically. This was during the DS Unbreakable meta too, and so his cages were very strong, especially as you could camp them still as well, so he was pretty crazy. Hag I would say was basically peak strength from her buffs way back in the day up to the release of boons in September 2021. This was what killed her I think, along with DbD's slow creep against stealth and trap killers. Hag was actually quite effective before this and consistently considered A tier with her ability to solidly hold down an area, and pre-anti-camp measures she was one of, if not the best camper in the game. S tier, crazily powerful. Now we're getting into the real powerhouses, the true peaks of many killers, which really broke the game. Wesker was strongest pre 8.0.0 back when his infection rate was much higher, and you'd retain 50% of your Ouroboros infection after being unhooked, and suffer a higher hindered percentage when fully infected too. This allowed him to slow down games incredibly efficiently, and his current lack of it really does show I think. This paired with his fast movement ability, and he was genuinely really strong and oppressive. Trickster became particularly strong in a PTB in November 2023. During this PTB he received a number of buffs but also nerfs, but overall was buffed by these changes. He became 4.6 instead of 4.4, he lost his recoil to his throwing, and he was now able to damage and achieve his main event far quicker. It was particularly deadly though with his old iridescent Death Throws compilation, which reloaded your blades for you after each main event, which truly made him an unstoppable monster. Pinhead was super strong just post his release in September 2021, when the box and chain hunts were slightly more oppressive, shooting chains out even if you held the box. He also had Old Engineer's Fang, which had no downsides at all, as well as add-ons that reduced chain hunt start times more significantly. The fact he was so new as well meant he was a bit harder to counter, with him offering up a more complex power. Knight was at his peak strength I would say directly after his overdrive buff in January 2024, He became a bit of a monster, allowing him to move incredibly quickly and insta-down with ease. The other argued time would be Instabilly back in the day with Old Tinkerer and Old Carburetor Tuning Guide, these add-ons allowing you to rev your saw very quickly. Either way, he's about here, I think. Blight was not too dissimilar, with him being insanely strong, but instead after his release, once he'd had his bugs and some strange oddities corrected, like his low POV. Blight was very strong in early 2021 therefore, with his perk Hex Undying paired with Hex Ruin allowing for him to be a monster with strong gen regression. He also had his old add-ons too, such as Old Alchemist Ring and Blighted Crow. Alchemist Ring allowing you to replenish all of your charges with every hit. It was pretty busted. Deathslinger was strongest post his release in 2021 when he was able to instantly ADS with his spear gun. This made him incredibly deadly, as he could snap his sights onto survivors in, well, not even seconds, but less. He also had a much smaller tear radius, which helped him too. Skull Merchant's 3-gen Menace days that last from her launch in March 2023 to April 2023 was probably her strongest state, back when Merchant was able to hold a 3-gen until server closure if she wished. Those weren't the days. Merchant was able to use her drones to guard a 3-gen using recently buffed gen regression perks like Cool of Brine and Overcharge to stop the 3-gen from being broken. This was so strong it literally caused the later introduction of the anti-gen kick mechanic and the end of the 3-gen meta. Legion was strongest post December 2018 when they were able to pair up Stab Wound Study and Frank's mixtape, allowing them to utilize their old version of their power to essentially trap people within Deep Wound until they went down. You were able to apply Deep Wound and then repeatedly lower their timer by stabbing again and again, all whilst the survivor was not able to exit a chase, as you would run backwards to stop it being a chase, which is just crazy. This led to a lot of DCs and anger. Oni was strongest in December 2018 during his PTB days when he could flick basically anywhere, start up his dashes faster, and got more blood in general. PTB Oni was kind of crazy and made Oni into an unstoppable monster. S+ tier. Yeah, we got an S+ tier on this one. Actually insane. For the killers who were just in an insanely broken state at various points in the game's history, and should have honestly never been this way. Artis was quite considerably strong during her PTB, notably. Back then, while she did still have a few more of her counters, like the ability to break crows by shining a flashlight onto them, she also had buffs. One key one was that idle crows were able to afflict damage states onto survivors who walked into them while swarmed. This made basically any loop in the game possible to shut down reliably every time with her power. Shaq even became pointless, and the only way to counter her was to simply leave the loop. Freddy was strongest during 2020 and 2021 when he was capable of the Forever Freddy build. Freddy at base was already quite strong after his initial rework, but the key thing that made him busted was his two add-ons, Jump Rope and Swing Chains. Together they allowed for a 21% slowdown to all speeds. Pair this up with other slowdowns like Thana and games ground to a halt. It was genuinely very hard to break out of a Forever Freddy match, hence the name. Kaneki was mad powerful around his release date and before he received a number of nerfs. Kaneki had a longer range, better add-ons, and the ability to lock on to just about anyone from a very long range too. He had one of the easiest first hits out of any character in DbD history, and he was able to traverse the map in mere seconds. He's still really good now, but his release date version was wildly powerful. Huntress was wildly powerful back in July 2017 with the ability to pair together her wind-up speed add-ons, Mana Grass Braid and Flower Babushka with the perk Tinkerer, to allow her to machine gun her hatchets at incredibly fast speeds. This alongside her ability to run the add-on Iridescent Head, which could insta-down. However, back then you could also pair it up with Infantry Belt to get 4 insta-down hatchets at once. Ridiculous. Twins were strongest during their rework PTB in April 2024. During this PTB they received an insane buff wall, and Victor became even stronger than he already was. In this PTB they allowed Victor to simply repeatedly down survivors without ever attaching onto them, with him being capable of doing back-to-back pounces, and he couldn't be kicked post-bounce either now. This, along with a slew of quality of life changes they direly needed, these also being the only thing to end up staying, which is a bit sad. Victor could also be recalled almost instantly and whenever. It was so busted. For a period of time, twins were maybe number 2, maybe number 1 even, in the game. Spirit used to be genuinely insane back in late 2018 when she had access to the Prayer Beads Bracelet add-on, an add-on which was so good they completely removed its existence from the game. This add-on allowed your phases to be completely silent, and Spirit had no directional sound back then either, meaning this add-on made it so there was basically no counterplay at all. It was the time of standstill Spirit, but also jump scare Spirit, as you could phase up to people working on generators and grab them off without them ever knowing you were coming. It was really annoying and frustrating and incredibly strong. Nurse was strongest after patch 1.9.0 in January 2018. In this patch, she'd been given all her quality of life improvements, and she still had access to up to 5 blinks at a time, as well as the ability to utilize expose perks with her kit. She was a monster during this time. Still is, but back then is something else. Alright, well, that's gonna do it. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you think there were different peaks for any of these characters. Thanks, and goodbye.